Comment, like, subscribe. The bell keeps you notified. It helps the show thrive. Acronyms are pretty concrete things, and yes, I know what I'm talking about in today's video aren't actually acronyms but initialisms, but acronym is a way more popular term, and I gotta hit that sweet SEO, so here we are. Take BBC an example. The BBC was founded in 1922, and that acronym hasn't changed at all. Yes, I know it has different meanings too, especially outside the UK, so stop giggling at the back there. Though perhaps more impressively, the acronym of RSVP dates back as far as the mid-19th century, and gaudy wedding invites around the world are still bearing those exact same 4 letters. So what's interesting is that one of the more popular acronyms heard on a day-to-day basis in our modern world is one that isn't set in stone. It seems to be constantly changing and growing in size. That being the acronym we now use as an umbrella term for various subgroups of sexuality and gender identities. In modern times, the shortest form of this acronym you will most likely come across is the 4-letter form of LGBT. This stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. For some time, this is all there was to this acronym. It was actually shorter, as I'm sure some viewers may remember. In more recent years, however, this acronym seemingly keeps growing, with additional letters being put at the end. Even numbers and mathematical symbols are being thrown in there too. The most popular long form of this acronym, from my estimation, is probably LGBTQIA+. The additional QIA+ in this version means queer/questioning, intersex, asexual, and the plus encompasses everything else that these letters do not. Quick side note, I won't really be explaining the actual origins of terms like gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender in this video. We covered a lot of those in a previous video, which you can go check out if you wish. Though while LGBTQIA+ might seem pretty long, it has actually gotten longer at times too. One of the longer versions I've spotted is LGBTTQQIAAP, with the 2 T's standing for transgender and transsexual, the 2 Q's standing for queer and questioning, the 2 A's standing for ally and asexual, and the P standing for pansexual. There's also the lengthy LGBTQQIP2SA. This is very similar to the previous acronym, but with only 1 T and the 2 S standing for 2 spirits. Other versions have been used, including a U for unsure, a C for curious, a third T for transvestite, an SA for straight ally, a different P for polyamorous, an H for HIV infected, and an O for other. If you really want to make the longest possible variation of this acronym, it would be something like LGBTTQQI PP2SA SAU CHO+. I'm sure you get the idea. This is an acronym that's far from set in stone and is constantly changing. The length of this acronym and the letters used within it are a topic of debate themselves. People have all sorts of opinions on this acronym. Some feel that it is too long and unwieldy and difficult to remember, while others argue that despite how long it can be at times, all these letters still don't represent enough subgroups of sexual and gender diversity. There's actually a completely different alternative acronym that is used by some instead, MOGII. This stands for marginalized orientations, gender identities, and intersex. This acronym has a whole list of pros and cons unto itself, which could probably make for an interesting video unto itself someday. It took some time for there to be specific language and words to talk about sexual and gender diversity at all though. Words to reflect anything other than what we have dubbed the norm in regards to sex and gender didn't start popping up until the late 19th century. One of the first umbrella terms we had for who we now refer to as LGBTQIA+ community members was coined by English physician Havelock Ellis. Ellis coined the term of sexual invert and applied this term to men and women we would now recognize as homosexual or transgender. It was also in the late 19th century that we gained another term for LGBTQIA+ people that we don't really use anymore. Karl Ulrichs was a German lawyer and pioneered the modern gay rights movement. He has even been dubbed the first gay man in world history. The term he coined was URNING. This term comes from ancient Greek mythology, with the name of Aphrodite Urania, with Urania being an epithet epithet for that goddess of Aphrodite. This epithet comes from the fact that she was born from the semen of the god Uranus, meaning she was born from the love of a man, hence why it got applied to love between people of the same sex, like two men. Of course, ancient Greece has a deep link with homosexuality, so you might be wondering why the language of homosexuality didn't originate with them. Well, that's because while the ancient Greeks would have intercourse between two men, it wasn't really recognized as homosexuality, because the ancient Greeks didn't really think of sexual orientation in the same way we do in many parts of the world today. This is a bit of a tangent, so I'll just quote Wikipedia on the matter quickly. Greek society did not distinguish sexual desire or behavior by the gender of the participants, but rather by the role that each participant played in the sex act, that of active penetrator or passive penetrated. Like I said, slight tangent, but explains why the language of homosexuality didn't really start with them. But anyway, Karl Ulrich applied this term of urning to people we would now see as being homosexual, transgender, or queer gender. In his own words, male urnings were male-bodied people with the souls of women, and female urnings were female-bodied people with the souls of men. He of course identified himself as an urning too, saying, "We urnings constitute a special class of human gender. We are our own gender, a third sex." And while Karl Ulrich is a pivotal person in the world of LGBTQIA+ right, his term of urning didn't really catch on. Neither did Ellis's term of sexual invert either. Thankfully, however, in 1869, one of the most popular umbrella terms for the LGBTQIA+ community was coined. It's a term we still use today, and one I've already used multiple times in this video: homosexual. Homosexual was coined by Austro-Hungarian journalist Károly Müller-Kertbeny. It was in this year the Prussian government were toying with the idea of adding language that banned male same-sex relationships into its constitution. Angered by this, Kertbeny wrote an open letter to the government, calling this rule a nonsense. It was in this letter that the world first saw the word homosexual. It was also in this same letter where we first found the terms of heterosexual and bisexual too. Kertbeny had actually coined homosexual earlier, but in a private letter to none other than one Karl Ulrich. I always love when historical figures interact with one another like this. It's like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but instead it's just our actual universe. Though nevertheless, with the coining of this term, it seems that homosexual became the umbrella term for this community for some time. It seems that would only be around 100 years later that it would be usurped. In the 1960s, a word that had previously been used as a slur for homosexual people was repopularized and reclaimed by the soon-to-be dubbed LGBTQIA+ community, that being the word gay. Gay is a really interesting word. It began life meaning things like happy and joyful before it was adapted into a slur to use against homosexual people. It was the Stonewall generation of homosexuals in New York City who reclaimed the word gay, especially in the aftermath of the Stonewall riots. It was from here that gay became a more popular umbrella term for LGBTQIA+ people than homosexual. However, as the 1960s and 1970s progressed, the word gay once again began to shift in meaning. Instead of referring to all LGBTQIA+ people, gay started to refer more to just homosexual men, as opposed to all sexually diverse people. This meant that gay stopped being a really relevant term for homosexual women, or bisexual people, or transgender people. They still had their own individual terms like lesbian, which once again has roots in ancient Greece, and bisexual, but gay could no longer really apply to all these people as an umbrella term. This meant that a new umbrella term had to be formed, and it was in the 1980s that we finally got our first acronym, that being LGB. The Oxford English Dictionary has its first written evidence of LGB from 1985 with the Valley Women's Voice newspaper, which read, "To gather further information, please contact LGB Empowerment Coalition." What's interesting in all this is the order of this acronym too. Historically, people wrote this acronym as GLB as opposed to LGB. This is because while the LGB community at this time were inclusive and represented many people, it seems that gay men were the front and center in many instances, such as there being way more gay bars than lesbian bars in cities, or more gay men in the media than lesbian women, and so on. This is why for many they put the G first. The L solidified its spot in first place, however, in the 80s and 90s during the AIDS epidemic. This epidemic affected way more gay men than lesbian women, and with little attention being given to the crisis from the outside world, it was lesbian women who cared for many of these gay, unwell men. This also came at a time of an increased push for women's rights that helped highlight the lesbian community even more. As a show of solidarity between gay men and lesbian women, the L was put in first place, where it has stayed to this day. It was also in the 90s that the LGB acronym received its fourth letter, the T for transgender. It was in this decade that transgender people finally got more recognition, and their initial added to this acronym. Once again, the OED have their earliest recording of LGBT from 1992, coming from Gaynet Digest, talking about the National LGBT Study Conference. This finally gave us the four-letter acronym of LGBT, which is very much seen as the de facto version of this acronym, though would not stop growing however. As the years went on during the 2000s and the 2010s, other letters were thrown into the mix, as we've talked about near the start with Q for queer/questioning, I for intersex, and A for asexual/ally. We don't seem to have specific moments in which these extra letters started to get included, it would seem. Though I myself remember seeing this acronym grow online in places like Twitter and Tumblr during the 2000s and 2010s, which led to this very moment in time, where LGBTQIA+ is the longer form of this acronym, with there being many other forms of different length containing different letters too. So, as the title of this video asks, why does the LGBT acronym keep getting longer? Well, it seems to simply be because as the years go on, more subgroups of different sexualities and genders are not only emerging, but gaining way more recognition and respect from the wider world, which in turn culminates in their initial getting added to this acronym, making them something of an official part of this inclusive community. Language really isn't set in stone, and the growth of this acronym shows us that more and more different groups of people are being cared for. To quote Jeffrey Ivanone, a writer who specializes in LGBTQIA+ history, the LGBTQ acronym is not just a collection of letters that represent identities. Rather, these letters are history embodied. They tell the story of the modern American gay civil rights movement, reminding us that our victories have been a long time coming and have not been easily won. There is still much work to do. So, happy Pride Month to all. Yeah, I know this video came out on July 1st, literally the day after Pride Month came to an end. But I genuinely feel that while having a whole month to celebrate Pride is fantastic in its own right, LGBTQIA+ people and their stories should be celebrated and shared all year round. That and my schedule meant I completely missed the opportunity to actually post this video in June. My bad. Name Explained depends on viewers like yourself supporting the channel financially on Patreon, so a huge thank you to everyone who does. Donating just $1 a month helps the channel amazingly and gets you bonuses including ad-free videos, exclusive content, and the power to request ideas to be made into actual Name Explained videos. $2 a month gets you all that, plus your name here with all these awesome people. Visit patreon.com/nameexplain or click the link down below to find out how you too can support the channel. Thank you. Thanks for reaching the end of the video. Why not watch another and subscribe to keep up to date on all things Name Explain. You can find myself on Instagram where I'm NameExplainYT, and join the Facebook group Friends of Name Explain to talk with myself and other name nerds. All that will be linked down below. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and once again, thank you all so much.